I spent $40,000 on my sister's tuition at a private art school when at a family dinner she announced a trip to Italy and said, "I hope you're ready for extra work." And my mom added, "You should be proud that you're helping her build a future." I was furious at their audacity, wished them luck, and stopped giving money. Now they keep calling me saying that I owe her support. Look, I never thought I'd be the guy posting on Reddit about family drama, but here we are. My name's Jason, I'm 28, and I've been working as an electrician since I was 19. Not the most glamorous job, but it pays decent, and honestly, I love the work. There's something satisfying about fixing things that are broken, you know? For the longest time, I had this dream. Nothing crazy, just wanted to open my own electrical contracting business. I had it all planned out, the name, the logo, even found this perfect little office space downtown. Every week, I drive by and imagine my name on that window. Jason's Electric Solutions. Had a nice ring to it, right? So I did what any responsible American does when they want something. I worked my tail off for it. 60-hour weeks became my normal. While my buddies were out hitting the bars every Friday night, I was pulling overtime at construction sites or doing side jobs on weekends. My social life pretty much disappeared, but I didn't care. I had my eye on the prize. My savings account slowly grew from hundreds to thousands. I was actually getting close. Maybe 6 more months and I'd have enough of the down payment, equipment, and enough cushion to survive those first lean months. I was so excited I could practically taste the freedom of being my own boss. Then my little sister, Megan, graduated high school. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my sister. She's 4 years younger than me, and growing up, we were pretty tight. She always had this artistic side. Sketching, painting, making these elaborate art projects that Mom would hang all over the refrigerator. Everyone always said she was talented, and honestly, she was pretty good. But talented and practical are two very different things in America, especially when you're talking about making a living. I mean, we all know the jokes about starving artists, right? Well, Megan decided she wanted to prove those jokes wrong by going to one of those fancy private art schools. The kind that cost more per year than most people make. When she got accepted to the prestigious Whitmore Institute of Fine Arts, my parents went absolutely crazy with pride. You'd think she'd won the lottery or something. Mom was calling everyone, aunts, cousins, neighbors, the mailman, telling them about her daughter, the future famous artist. There was just one tiny problem. The tuition was about $45,000 a year. For art school, in today's economy, my dad's a mechanic at a local garage, and Mom works part-time at a daycare. Good, honest work, but not exactly rolling in dough money. They've been living paycheck to paycheck for years, just like most middle-class families in America. The financial aid office basically laughed at them. Apparently, they made just enough to disqualify for need-based aid, but nowhere near enough to actually afford the place. Welcome to the American middle-class trap, right? That's when the hints started. Oh boy, the hints. Mom would casually mention during Sunday dinner how Megan was having trouble sleeping because she was so worried about her future. Dad would sigh real loud while looking at bills and mutter about how unfair life was for young people trying to follow their dreams. And Megan? She'd get the sad, defeated look whenever anyone mentioned college. The guilt trip was expertly orchestrated, like they'd been planning it for months, which, looking back, they probably had been. The breakthrough moment came during a family barbecue in July. Uncle Rick was there with his kids, and somehow the conversation turned to Megan's acceptance to art school. Everyone was congratulating her, but she just sat there looking miserable. Finally, she spoke up and said how heartbroken she was that she probably couldn't go because of money. The whole table went quiet. Then Mom looked right at me and said something that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. She said Megan had such incredible talent, but the education was just so expensive, and wouldn't it be wonderful if someone in the family could help her achieve her dreams? Everyone's eyes turned to me, not to my married cousin, who works in finance, not to Uncle Rick, who owns his own plumbing company. To me, the single guy with no kids and a steady job. I felt trapped. Here's my baby sister, looking at me with these hopeful eyes, my parents clearly expecting me to step up, and my whole extended family watching to see what kind of brother I was going to be. What was I supposed to say? that my business dreams mattered more than her education, that I'd worked too hard to give it all away. In that moment, surrounded by family expectations and guilt, I couldn't find the words. So I did what seemed like the right thing at the time. I said I'd help with her first semester expenses while we figured out a long-term plan. Just to get her started, you know? Maybe she could get scholarships after proving herself, or find some kind of work-study program. The relief and joy on everyone's faces should have felt good. But instead, I felt this sinking sensation in my stomach, like I just signed away something important without reading the fine print. That night, I transferred $15,000 from my business fund to help with her first semester tuition and living expenses. It was supposed to be temporary, just a loan between siblings. But you know what they say about the road to hell being paved with good intentions. That first transfer was like opening a dam. Once the water started flowing, it never really stopped. Within 2 months, Megan needed money for art supplies. Apparently, the basic package was enough. She needed professional-grade materials that cost hundreds of dollars. Then it was a laptop specifically designed for digital art. Then a graphics tablet. Then software subscriptions. Each request came with detailed explanations about why these things were absolutely essential for her success. And each time, she promised it would be the last time she'd need help. By Christmas, I'd given her nearly $25,000. My business dream was officially on life support. But hey, at least my sister was following hers, right? The worst part wasn't even the money. It was watching how quickly she adapted to having someone else pay for everything. The grateful phone calls became shorter. The promises to pay me back became vaguer. And the requests became more frequent and casual, like I was her personal ATM instead of her brother, who was sacrificing his own future. But I told myself it was temporary, just until she got established, just until she learned to manage on her own. So where did I leave off? Oh, right. I'd already blown through $25,000 of my business, savings by Christmas, and my sweet little sister was getting way too comfortable with my wallet being wide open. Spring semester rolled around, and with it came a whole new level of financial demands. Megan needed money for rent. Apparently the dorms weren't conducive to her creative process. She found this cute little studio apartment near campus that cost $1,200 a month. In our town, you could rent a decent 2-bedroom house for that much. But hey, location is everything when you're an artist, right? Then came the utilities, groceries, gas money, and of course, more art supplies. But here's where things got really interesting. She also needed money for what she called networking expenses. Apparently, that meant eating at trendy cafes where other art students hung out, going to gallery openings, and buying clothes that fit her new artistic image. I remember one phone call where she explained that she absolutely had to have this $300 vintage leather jacket because it was essential for her to look the part at student exhibitions. When I suggested maybe she could find something similar at a thrift store, she actually got offended and told me I didn't understand the art world. My parents, Linda and Michael, weren't just okay with this arrangement. They were actively encouraging it. Every time I'd express even a hint of frustration about the money situation, Mom would give me this disappointed look and say something like, "She's your sister, Jason. You should be proud that you're helping her build a future." Dad would chime in with his own guilt trips about family loyalty and how successful people always help their relatives achieve their dreams. According to them, I was being selfish for even thinking about my own business when Megan's artistic career was at such a crucial stage. The thing that really got to me was how they talked about it, like I was some kind of millionaire just casually throwing money around. Like I had worked every single day for 9 years to save that money. Like those 60-hour weeks meant nothing. Like my dreams were somehow less important than hers because mine involved fixing electrical problems instead of painting pretty pictures. But the worst part? Megan wasn't even grateful anymore. What started as tearful phone calls thanking me for believing in her had turned into casual text messages listing what she needed money for that week. No please, no thank you, just expectations. By the end of her first year, I'd given her nearly $40,000. My business fund was completely wiped out, and I'd started dipping into my regular savings just to keep up with her demands. But everyone kept telling me it was temporary, that once she graduated and started selling her art, everything would work out. Summer break Should have been a relief, right? Wrong. Megan decided she needed to stay near campus to work on her portfolio and take some additional classes. More rent, more expenses, more money flowing out of my already strained bank account. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Megan had heard about this incredible summer program in Europe. Some kind of intensive art retreat in Tuscany where students could study under famous artists and gain international experience. The cost? A cool $8,000 for 6 weeks, not including airfare. She brought it up during our weekly family barbecue, like it was already a done deal. Just casually mentioned between bites of hamburger that she'd be spending the summer in Italy perfecting her craft. When I asked how she planned to pay for it, she looked at me like I'd asked her to solve quantum physics. My parents immediately jumped into cheerleader mode. Mom started going on about what an amazing opportunity it was and how these kinds of experiences only come once in a lifetime. Dad talked about how international exposure would really set her apart from other artists. They were acting like she'd just been offered a full scholarship to Harvard. I tried to be the voice of reason. I pointed out that she was already costing me everything I'd worked for, that maybe she should consider getting a part-time job to help with expenses, or that perhaps this European trip wasn't absolutely necessary for her education. You would have thought I'd suggested she drop out of school and join a circus. Mom got this horrified expression and started talking about how I was trying to hold Megan back from reaching her potential. Dad accused me of being jealous of her opportunities. And Megan? She just sat there looking hurt and betrayed, like I was a villain in some twisted family drama. The conversation got heated pretty quickly. I explained that I'd already given her more money than most people see in years, that my own dreams were completely on hold, and that maybe it was time for her to start taking some responsibility for her choices. That's when Megan dropped a line that still makes my eye twitch when I think about it. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I hope you're ready for some extra shifts, Jason. This opportunity could change my whole career. Not, thank you for everything you've already done. Not, I know this is a lot to ask. Just a casual assumption that I'd figure out how to fund her European vacation, because that's what I did. I solved her money problems. I asked her if she'd ever considered getting a job. You know, like most college students do when they need money." The response was a laugh that sounded more like a snort, followed by the most entitled thing I'd ever heard her say. "I can't work, Jason. I'm an artist. I need to focus on my craft, not waste time flipping burgers or whatever." That was it. That was the moment something inside me just snapped. Here I was, working my butt off at a job she apparently considered beneath her, funding her entire lifestyle, while she looked down on the very work that made her dreams possible. I stood up from that picnic table and told my entire family exactly how I felt. I said I was done. Done paying her rent. Done funding her art supplies. Done being treated like a personal bank account with legs. I told them it was time for Megan to learn how to live in the real world like the rest of us. The silence that followed was deafening. Then all hell broke loose. Mom started crying about how I was abandoning my sister. Dad accused me of being selfish and cruel. Megan just stared at me like I completely lost my mind. I told them I wasn't asking for the money back. That ship had sailed. But from that moment forward, Megan was going to have to figure out her own finances, like every other adult in America. No more rent money. No more grocery money. No more European art retreats funded by my sweat and overtime. I left that barbecue feeling lighter than I had in months, but also knowing that I just declared war on my own family. And trust me, they weren't going to take this lying down. What happened next was so manipulative and underhanded that I'm still processing it 2 years later. Because when entitled people don't get their way, they don't just accept it and move on. They get creative. And my family was about to show me just how creative they could be when their golden goose finally refused to lay any more eggs. You know that feeling when you think you've hit rock bottom, but then someone hands you a shovel? Yeah. That's exactly what happened next. Because my family didn't just accept my decision to stop funding Megan's lifestyle. They decided to declare war on me instead. The first shot was fired about 3 days after the barbecue confrontation. I was at work, running cable through a ceiling in some office building, when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Text after text from Megan, each one more demanding than the last. The messages started off trying to sound reasonable. She explained how she'd already committed to the European program and couldn't back out now. How she'd told all her art friends about this amazing opportunity. How devastated she'd be if she had to miss it because her own brother wouldn't support her dreams. When I didn't respond to the guilt trip, the messages got more direct. She needed the money for her rent, which was due in 2 days. She needed grocery money because she was literally starving. She needed gas money to get to her summer classes. Each message ended with some variation of, "You OWE me this." Not "could you help me," or "would you consider it?" I owed her. Like somehow, by being born first and working my tail off, I'd automatically signed up to be her personal ATM for life. I'd had enough. I called her back and made it crystal clear that the bank at Jason was permanently closed. No more money, no exceptions, no negotiations. If she needed cash, she could get a job like literally every other college student in America. Her response was, well, let's just say it showed me a side of my little sister I'd never seen before. She screamed at me for being selfish and cruel, called me a terrible brother who was sabotaging her future out of jealousy, said I was just like all the other people who didn't understand art and want to keep talented people down. The call ended with her hanging up on me, but not before promising that she'd figure out a way to get the money she needed with or without my help. At the time, I thought it was just anger talking. I mean, what was she going to do? Rob a bank? Turns out, she had something much more personal in mind. The next morning, I was drinking coffee and getting ready for work when my phone rang. It was Megan, and she sounded way too cheerful for someone who'd been screaming at me less than 12 hours earlier. She started the conversation with this fake sweet voice, thanking me for making her realize she needed to be more independent, said she'd figured out a solution to her money problems and wouldn't need to bother me anymore. Then came the punchline that made my blood freeze. "Oh, by the way, I pawned your watch to cover this month's rent. Thanks for leaving it at Mom and Dad's house. It made everything so much easier." My watch, my grandfather's watch, the 1967 Omega Seamaster that he'd given me on my 18th birthday, right before he passed away from cancer. The watch I'd worn every single day for 10 years until I'd made the mistake of leaving it in my old bedroom during a family visit. It wasn't just any watch, either. Grandpa had bought it new when he got back from Vietnam, and it was the only expensive thing he'd ever owned. He'd saved up for months working double shifts at the steel mill just to afford it. That watch represented everything he'd taught me about hard work, responsibility, and earning what you want in life. And my entitled little sister had just pawned it like it was some random piece of junk she'd found in a drawer. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak for a few seconds. When I finally found my voice, I asked her which pawn shop she'd taken it to. Maybe I could get it back before someone else bought it. That's when she dropped the second bomb. She'd already used the money to pay her rent and buy groceries. The watch was gone, sold to cover her living expenses while she figured out how to fund her European art adventure. And the worst part? She said it like she was doing me a favor by becoming more resourceful. I immediately called my parents, thinking surely they'd be as outraged as I was. Surely they'd understand that stealing family heirlooms crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Surely they'd make her fix this somehow. Boy, was I wrong. Mom's response was basically, well, she was desperate, Jason. What did you expect her to do? Dad said I was making too big a deal out of just a watch, and that I should be proud of Megan for finding a creative solution to her problems. A creative solution. They called theft and pawning irreplaceable family heirlooms a creative solution. I realized in that moment that my parents had completely lost their minds when it came to their precious daughter. In their eyes, Megan could do no wrong, and anything she did in pursuit of her artistic dreams was automatically justified. That was the moment I understood that this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, boundaries, and basic human decency. And my family had decided that none of those things applied when it came to supporting Megan's lifestyle. I told my parents exactly what I thought of their creative solution and their parenting skills. I explained that what Megan had done wasn't resourceful, it was theft, that enabling her entitled behavior wasn't helping her grow as a person, It was turning her into someone I didn't even recognize. Their response was to defend her even more strongly. Mom started crying about how stressed and overwhelmed Megan was. Dad accused me of being heartless and unsupportive. They made it clear that as far as they were concerned, I was a villain in this story. That night, I made a decision that felt both devastating and liberating at the same time. I blocked all three of them on social media, changed my phone number, and decided I was done with the whole toxic situation. If they wanted to enable Megan's behavior and treat me like garbage, they could do it without my participation. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. No more guilt trips, no more demands for money, no more being treated like an ATM instead of a family member. It was scary, but it also felt like I was finally taking control of my own life. Of course, cutting contact didn't make the consequences disappear. Within a week, I heard through mutual friends that Megan had been evicted from her apartment. Apparently, pawning one watch didn't cover all her expenses, and without me as a backup plan, reality had come crashing down hard. She'd moved back in with my parents, who immediately started taking out loans and credit card advances to continue funding her lifestyle. They were literally going into debt to avoid making their daughter face the consequences of her choices. Part of me felt bad about that. These were my parents, after all, and watching them destroy their financial future was painful. But they'd made their choice when they decided that Megan's wants were more important than everyone else's needs. They'd chosen to enable her instead of parent her, and now they were dealing with the results. As for me, I started rebuilding my savings account, one paycheck at a time. It felt good to see those numbers growing again, instead of constantly shrinking. My business dreams were still on hold, but at least they weren't getting further away every month. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, my family decided to launch one final offensive that would test every ounce of resolve I had left. Because apparently, cutting me off from their drama wasn't enough. They wanted to drag me back in kicking and screaming, whether I liked it or not. You'd think that after cutting contact with my family, I'd finally get some peace, right? Wrong. Apparently, when you've been someone's personal bank account for years, they don't just let you walk away quietly. They come after you like a collection agency with emotional baggage. The first few weeks were actually pretty amazing. I came home from work to a quiet apartment with no guilt-inducing voicemails waiting for me. No text demanding money for art supplies or rent. No family dinners where I got lectured about supporting my sister's dreams. Just blessed, peaceful silence. I started sleeping better for the first time in months. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach finally loosened. I even went out with some buddies from work and remembered what it felt like to spend money on myself without feeling guilty about it. It was like emerging from an abusive relationship, except the abuser was my entire family. But you know what they say about the calm before the storm. About 6 weeks after I blocked everyone, my phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Unknown number, which usually means spam, but something made me answer it anyway. It was my dad, calling from a friend's phone. His voice sounded different, strained, tired, maybe even a little desperate. He started off trying to sound casual, asking how I was doing, if work was going well, all that small talk nonsense. But I could hear the tension underneath it all. Finally, he got to the real reason for the call. They needed money. Not Megan this time. Them. Apparently, all those loans and credit card advances they'd taken out to support her lifestyle had caught up with them. They were drowning in debt and couldn't make the minimum payments anymore. Dad explained how they'd mortgaged a house to pay for Megan's second year at art school, how they'd maxed out 3 credit cards covering her living expenses, how Mom had taken out a personal loan against her retirement account to fund that European trip that started this whole mess. The numbers he rattled off were staggering. They owed over $80,000 in various debts, all accumulated in the past year, trying to keep Megan's artistic dreams alive. Their house payment had tripled. Their credit cards were charging 20-something% interest. They were one missed payment away from losing everything. And naturally, they wanted me to bail them out. Dad asked if I could loan them $15,000 to get caught up on payments and give them breathing room to figure out a long-term solution. Just a loan, he promised. They'd pay me back as soon as they got their finances sorted out. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd spent a year treating me like garbage, enabling my sister's theft of irreplaceable family heirlooms, and defending her entitled behavior at every turn. Now, they wanted me to rescue them from the consequences of their own terrible decisions. I told Dad no. Not just no, but hell no. I explained that they'd made their choice when they decided Megan's wants were more important than financial responsibility. They'd chosen to go into debt rather than make her get a job like every other college student. This was a natural result of their parenting decisions, and I wasn't going to enable them any more than I had enabled her. Dad didn't take it well. He started going on about family loyalty and how I was abandoning them in their time of need. Said I was being selfish and cruel, just like Mom had said about the Megan situation. Apparently, in their world, setting boundaries was equivalent to betrayal. The call ended with him hanging up on me, but not before telling me I'd regret this decision for the rest of my life. That really stung, not gonna lie. These were my parents, and hearing my father basically disown me over money was devastating. But I knew I'd made the right choice. They created this mess by refusing to parent their daughter properly, and bailing them out would just teach everyone involved that bad decisions don't have real consequences, as long as someone else is around to fix them. 3 days later, my mom called from yet another borrowed phone. If Dad's approach had been guilt and obligation, Mom went straight for the emotional jugular. She was crying before she even started talking, telling me how scared and overwhelmed they were, how they might lose the house, how this was all destroying their health and their marriage. She begged me to reconsider helping them, said she understood why I was angry, but that they were family and families stick together through tough times. Promised they'd learned their lesson and would never ask for money again if I just helped them this one time. The conversation went on for almost an hour, with Mom alternating between tears and anger. She'd cry about how desperate they were, then get mad when I didn't immediately offer to help. She'd promise they'd change, then blame me for causing their problems by cutting off support from Megan in the first place. That last part really got to me. According to Mom, this was all my fault. If I hadn't been so selfish and cruel to my sister, she wouldn't have needed their help. If I had just continued funding her lifestyle, none of this would have happened. I was a villain who destroyed the family by refusing to sacrifice my future for Megan's artistic dreams. I tried to explain that their financial problems were the result of their own choices, not mine. That enabling Megan's entitled behavior had hurt everyone involved, including her. That real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their actions so they can learn and grow. But Mom wasn't interested in personal responsibility or tough love. She wanted someone to blame for their situation, and I was a convenient target. The call ended with her telling me I was no longer welcome in their home and that I destroyed the family with my selfishness. Hearing your own mother basically disown you is something you never really prepare for. I spent the rest of that day feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Even though I knew I'd done the right thing, losing your entire family over money and boundaries was devastating. But you know what? As the days went by, that devastation slowly turned into something else. Relief. I realized that the family I'd lost wasn't actually the loving, supportive unit I thought it was. It was a toxic system that only worked when I was sacrificing everything for everyone else's benefit. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces of information through mutual friends and neighbors. My parents had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. They'd file for bankruptcy to deal with the overwhelming debt. Mom had to go back to work full-time, and Dad picked up weekend shifts at another garage. As for Megan, she'd finally dropped out of art school. Not because she learned about financial responsibility, but because my parents could no longer afford to keep her there. She was living with them in their tiny apartment, working part-time at a coffee shop, and apparently making everyone miserable with her constant complaints about how her dreams had been ruined. Part of me felt sorry for all of them. These were people I'd loved my whole life, and watching their lives fall apart was painful. But they'd had multiple opportunities to make better choices. They could have taught Megan about budgeting and responsibility. They could have supported her dreams in realistic ways. They could have treated me with respect instead of like a human ATM. Instead, they'd chosen enabling over parenting entitlement over gratitude, and manipulation over honest communication. The mess they were in was entirely of their own making, and I refused to feel guilty about their consequences anymore. So there I was, completely cut off from my family, rebuilding my life one paycheck at a time. Honestly, it was both the loneliest and most liberating period of my life. For the first time in years, every dollar I earned stayed in my pocket instead of flowing out to fund someone else's dreams. It was weird, but in a good way. I threw myself into work like never before, picked up every overtime shift I could get, took on weekend side jobs, and started networking with other contractors in the area. Without the constant drain of Megan's expenses, my savings account actually started growing again, slowly but steadily. The best part was rediscovering who I was without all that family drama weighing me down. I started hanging out with work buddies again, went to a few Rams games, even tried online dating for the first time. Turns out, when you're not stressed about money all the time, you're a lot more fun to be around. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Holidays were brutal. Thanksgiving came and went with me eating a Subway sandwich alone in my apartment while scrolling through social media posts of everyone else's family gatherings. Christmas was even worse. Walking past the family section at Target almost made me lose it completely. Spring rolled around, and I was making real progress toward my original goal. My business fund was growing again, and I'd even started looking at office spaces downtown. Jason's Electric Solutions was back on track, baby. It felt incredible to have hope again instead of that constant anxiety about money. That's when I got a call that completely blindsided me. Unknown number again, but this time it was Megan. Her voice sounded different. Quieter, less demanding, maybe even a little humble. She asked if we could meet for coffee. Said she had some things she wanted to tell me. My first instinct was to hang up. I'd been doing great without any of them in my life, and I wasn't interested in being dragged back into their drama. But something in her tone made me pause. She wasn't demanding anything, wasn't guilt-tripping me, wasn't making any promises about paying me back. She just sounded tired, against my better judgment. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where we used to hang out when she was in high school. I prepared myself for another attempt at manipulation, another sob story designed to open my wallet. But that's not what happened. Megan showed up looking completely different from the entitled art student I remembered. She was wearing plain clothes from Target instead of her usual trendy outfits. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked like she'd lost weight. Not in a good way, more like she'd been stressed and not eating well. She started by apologizing. Not the fake, manipulative kind of apology I'd expected, but a real one. She acknowledged how selfish and entitled she'd been, how much money she'd wasted, how badly she'd treated me after everything I'd done for her. Then she told me what had happened after their financial world collapsed. Living in that tiny apartment with our parents had been a nightmare. Dad worked constantly and came home angry. Mom was stressed and bitter about having to work full-time again. And everyone blamed everyone else for the situation they were in. Megan said the worst part was realizing that her art school friends didn't want anything to do with her once the money ran out. Turns out, those relationships were based on her ability to pick up tabs and fund group activities, not on genuine friendship. When she couldn't afford to keep up with their lifestyle anymore, they dropped her completely. She got a job at a local coffee shop, the same chain where she used to spend my money on overpriced lattes while complaining about having to be practical. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She was working 40 hours a week making minimum wage, trying to help our parents with bills, while saving money to go back to school. But here's the part that really surprised me. She wasn't planning to go back to art school. She'd enrolled in the local community college to get her basics done, then planned to transfer to the state university for a business degree. She wanted to learn about finance and maybe start her own small business someday. When I asked what happened to her artistic dreams, she laughed, but not in a bitter way. She said she still loved art and would always create things, but she'd learned the difference between a hobby and a career path. She wanted financial stability and independence more than she wanted to pursue some fantasy about becoming a famous artist. The conversation went on for 2 hours. She told me about how working retail had taught her to appreciate money in a way she never had before. How living with the consequences of her choices had forced her to grow up fast. How much she regretted not listening when I tried to teach her about budgeting and responsibility. She didn't ask for money. Not once. She didn't even hint at wanting my help. Instead, she thanked me for everything I had done and apologized for taking it all for granted. She said cutting her off was probably the best thing anyone had ever done for her, even though it hadn't felt that way at the time. As for our parents, she said they were slowly getting back on their feet, but were still dealing with the financial consequences of their choices. They'd learned some hard lessons about enabling versus helping, though she wasn't sure they'd ever admit out loud. When we parted ways that day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pride in my little sister. Not because of her artistic talent or her academic achievements, but because she'd finally learned to stand on her own 2 feet. She was working hard, making responsible choices, and taking ownership of her mistakes. Did this meeting lead to some magical family reunion? Nope. I still don't have regular contact with my parents, and honestly, I'm okay with that. They made their choices, and I've made mine. But Megan and I text occasionally now, and sometimes we grab coffee when we're both free. As for me, I finally opened Jason's Electric Solutions last month, found that perfect little office space downtown, hired my first employee, and landed 3 major contracts in the first week. The dream that got derailed for almost 2 years is finally becoming reality. I never got an apology from my parents for the way they treated me. I never got my grandfather's watch back. It's probably sitting on some collector's shelf somewhere, completely disconnected from its family history. And I never got back the $40,000 I spent trying to support my sister's unrealistic dreams. But you know what I did get? I got my self-respect back. I learned the difference between helping someone and enabling them. I discovered that setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for healthy relationships. And I found out that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. Most importantly, I learned that your dreams matter just as much as anyone else's. Working hard and saving money isn't selfish. It's responsible. And you don't owe anyone your future just because you're related to them. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole crazy journey. I know it was a long story, but sometimes life doesn't fit into neat little packages, you know? What do you think? Did I do the right thing by cutting my family off financially, or should I have kept trying to help them work things out? Have any of you dealt with similar situations where family members expected you to fund their dreams at the expense of your own? Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. If this story resonated with you or helped you think about your own family dynamics, hit that like button and consider subscribing for more real-life stories. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best investment you can make is in your own future.